Now that we've got all of our levels set, it's time to start positioning each of our sounds within the first dimension, that is, the frequency dimension. So our goal here is to control the space in terms of frequencies from low to high that each of our sound occupies, and be conscious of when they're overlapping and ensuring that that's intentional, that that overlap is happening. If we were striving for a perfectly clear mix, we wouldn't want any overlap whatsoever happening within this first dimension. But if we're looking for a muddier, more convoluted mix, we might strive for as much overlap as possible. So it's really up to you as the artist or as the mixing engineer for what you're trying to accomplish and how you're controlling how these sounds fit within the first dimension. So for the sake of exercise, let's assume that we're striving to have the clearest possible mix, and we want all of our sounds sitting within their own space. So the first thing we're going to do, or the tool that we use for this, is the EQ8, or any parametric EQ. So let's go into our audio effects, grab the EQ8. Let's drag and drop this onto all of our tracks. So I'm going to drag it onto kick. All right, now that we've got it added to all of our tracks, we can start with the most important element of our track and work our way outwards. So starting with this kick as an example, let's solo it out. The EQ8 is nice for those of us who have poor eyes because we can expand it out and see the spectrum visualized up top here. So now the EQ8 gets its name from the fact that it's an EQ. It allows us to balance out the frequencies present within a sound or boost them. And it's got 8 different filter bands that we can use to control the sound. So if we have it collapsed down, we can see that the visualizer here is in the middle, along with the editor that we can drag and drop to adjust the available bands that we have in there. And then across the bottom, we can see all 8 of the bands that we can have selected, each of them being turned on or off, and then selecting which of the filter shapes we would like to use within that band. And then we combine all 8 or whatever combination of these bands that we want to create a more complex filter shape to control how our sound is behaving over time. Now each of these filter bands has the same basic parameters. We have the filter shape that it's set to, whether or not it's on or off. Then we have its cutoff or its focus or its center frequency, its gain, whether or not we're boosting or reducing, and then its Q, which is how focused or how much resonance is occurring at that point. So if we look at band 2 there, we can see that it goes from being really focused to really broad and open. So that's what those parameters do there. So now in general, when we're using an EQ for the sake of mixing, it should be all about reduction, keeping in mind that our end goal here is that we've got plenty of headroom or dynamic space when we get into the mastering process to turn up the volume on the few things that we do want. So in this case, we're really looking at removing from the sound what is no longer necessary or what this sound doesn't need in order to contribute to this mix. So let's get back to a more default looking EQ here. In fact, I'm just going to pop open my browser here, drag and drop in another EQ just to get back to the default state. Let's pop this thing open. When I've got it popped open, we can actually see all 8 bands control parameters down here, and then the visualizer up top here. And then what we've got is dynamics or amplitude ranging on the x-axis here, going from not attenuating it to boosting it to reducing it. Then we have frequencies spanning left to right, starting down here at the bottom at nearly 20 hertz. It's actually right at 30 hertz there. If you look in the bottom left-hand corner, we can see what values the cursor is currently over. Then it ranges all the way up exponentially to nearly 20,000 hertz, which is about the range of human hearing, from around 20 hertz to about 20,000 hertz. So that's the available space that we have as humans to organize all of our music. So you're looking at the space of all, at least popular music. Of course, there's some stranger stuff out there that goes well beyond that, music for cats and things like that. But this is the available space that we have to work with. So we could kind of visualize here the entire track and think, great, so my kick drum needs to fit in down in this space and maybe a little bit of space up here. Then my bass has got to fit kind of in a notch in that middle space there. Then I've got that guitar, it's going to be in this space and probably some this space. And I've got the lead, maybe it's going to go in here somewhere. I've got all those hi-hats and snares and claps, maybe they're going to go up there. And really quickly we can run out of space. So the ideal world is everything has its own unique space within this spectrum. But the real world is that there's going to be some overlap and some give and take, and something might occupy just a little bit of that space, and then together they'll contribute to fill up that entire spectrum. So let's get into this. Let's start listening to this kick drum sound. Let's see, jump to a spot where it's happening. Should be happening at this moment. Oop. There we go. There we can see the visualized spectrum of that kick drum. Got a lot of low end frequency, and then it's tailoring off up towards the top. So I'll start by just familiarizing myself with what this sound needs in order to exist. Turn up the volume a little bit there. And let's bring in band 8 here. Let's turn it on. It's by default set to a low pass filter. Then let's just sweep down that cutoff frequency. Listening for how the sound behaves. Now we can hear that this sound has definitely lost its identity, so we've removed something from the sound that this needs to be a good kick drum. Let's open that back up. Maybe something right around there. The kick drum still sounds good. Now let's go look at the bottom end. Let's switch band 1 here to a high pass filter. Let's sweep it up. And there we can definitely hear that this kick drum has lost its identity. It no longer sounds like a kick drum. So those low frequencies are pretty important. But how low do we need? Maybe right around there, the bottom end that we can actually have. And then let's inspect the middle territory. Let's grab this band number 2, and let's just do some overboosting here to really hear what's happening in this space. Now don't let yourself be deceived by hearing something like that and be like, oh my gosh, that sounds amazing. So doing some wild boosts like this might be something that we'd done back in the sound design stages of things, doing some boosting, but we're here at mixing, so it's all about reducing the sound. So if I decide that that's the sound that I really like, then maybe I need to hack out some of this other space. Maybe I need to come down here, use band number 3, maybe focus it up a little bit more, take out some of that space. Now that I've given myself a little bit more room in terms of dynamics, I can bring up that volume just a little bit more. Maybe this should be a bit broader in this space. Maybe I can afford to hack out some more up top here. But then the next consideration is great. So this kick drum sounds wonderful by itself, but what else is going to have to fit in here? So let's go take a look at some of the other things that are happening here. If we jump over to perhaps the bass sound, let's see what's going on with the bass. Let's see, this starts happening over here. So without even looking or without even listening to it, we can see that the bass is really occupying a lot of this space, huge hole in the middle, and then some grit up top here. So when I combine that in with the kick drum's going to fit down here. And we should crack open some space here for those fundamentals in that the bass here, and then we're again removing some space there for the overtones, and the bass drum can come back in here around this 1000 Hertz. And then we need to make some space here, and that's just 2 elements. We've got to do this with all the elements of our track. So let's bring this one in. Oops, let's leave that kick drum going. So let's hack out the bottom end of this one. Just for good measure, let's pull out that middle space, and then let's bring out the top end as well. maybe something like that. And then we'll keep moving through all the rest of our elements of our track, thinking about exactly this. So I'm just going to go ahead and keep plowing forward. Let's keep working on our drums here. Let's see, let's add in the rim sound. All right, that's sounding a little bit better. We've still got a long ways to go, but things are starting to fit into their own space. So some things that I wanted to point out about what I was working towards there is if we look at all of these different brass sounds that are contributing to the overall brass sound, as I started with the trombones here. Let's go to where they're playing. And I actually pulled out a lot of their fundamentals, and I left really just kind of this upper part of them. And I did that because we've got two other elements that are going to contribute to that. So then down here I've got the Ratman brass. That's filling in kind of this mid-rangey, and I actually pulled it out of the highs there using some high shelving EQ and a high pass there to sweep out the lows. And then on the matrix brass, I used that as kind of the low end, hacking out those upper spaces for the rest of those two sounds to fit in, giving me the overall sound of so all three of those kind of build together to create that larger sound, and they've all kind of contributing different aspects of that overall sound. So that's something that you'll kind of be thinking about on a larger scale of how do these sounds work together, who's providing the support in which spaces, and who actually needs what space to contribute to that sound. So that's a little bit of an introduction into how we can use this EQ to start controlling how these sounds are contributing or fitting together in the frequency dimension. So next we move on to Panorama.